What's up, night owls? Welcome back to Demon Sleep. Real quick, drop a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from tonight. I personally read every single one of them, and honestly, it makes my day seeing you all from around the world. If these dark tailies help you drift off or just escape reality for a bit, smash that like button and subscribe. But only if you think we've earned it. No pressure. Alright, lights off, rain on, blankets up. Let's dive into tonight's nightmare fuel. The lost town that only appears in dreams. There are cartographers who have spent their entire professional lives, decades of careful, meticulous study, cataloging every settlement, every road, every unremarkable cluster of buildings that humanity has ever assembled upon this unremarkable planet. They are by nature thorough men and women, obsessive even. They do not miss things. It is not in their nature to miss things. And yet, there exists, or rather, there appears to exist, a town that has never appeared on any map produced by any cartographic institution in any country across the span of recorded human history. Not in the vast colonial surveys of the 18th century. Not in the satellite imaging systems of the 21st. Not in any cadastral record, any municipal registry, any postal database, any electoral roll. No road leads to it officially. No river bears its name. No census has ever counted its residents. And yet, thousands of people have been there. They have walked its streets. They have smelled the particular damp stone smell of its church, a church whose spire bends very slightly to the east in a way that seems architecturally improbable. They have heard the sound of water running somewhere beneath the cobblestones, always beneath, always out of sight, and they have felt, unanimously, that the water was not merely water, that it carried in its current something older than language, something that predated the first human mind that ever looked at darkness and tried to name it. Sleep researchers at 3 separate institutions, the University of Edinburgh, a private clinic in Sao Paulo, and a facility in Osaka whose name does not translate cleanly into English, have independently documented this phenomenon. Their papers were published. Their papers were read. Their papers were quietly, systematically, filed into the kind of academic obscurity reserved for findings that are inconvenient to the established order of things. What they found, stripped of the careful, distancing language of peer-reviewed science, is this: a statistically impossible number of people, across every continent, across every culture, across every age group and demographic, have dreamed of the same town, not similar towns. Not towns that share a vague atmospheric quality. The same town, the same church, the same eastward lean of the spire, the same sound of water that is not merely water. They call it those who have been and who have dared to compare notes in the corners of the internet where such comparisons are made. Vethara. No one knows where that name comes from. When asked, each person says simply that they heard it spoken while they were there. They cannot say who spoke it. They cannot say in what language it was spoken because it seemed to exist outside language, the way a scream exists outside grammar. The researchers' conclusion, buried in footnotes, stated that the shared dream architecture suggested either a form of collective unconscious mapping that no existing psychological framework could account for, or something else entirely. Something the lead researcher, a Dr. Maren Solberg, who resigned her position 8 months after publication and has not published since described in her private notes, later recovered by a colleague in 3 words. 3 words she underlined twice. It is aware. What follows is an account assembled from those notes, from the testimonies of 47 individuals across 19 countries, and from recordings, some audio, some video, one that no device should have been able to capture, made in the moments between waking and sleep. The moments when the border thins, the moments when Vethara is closest. You are about to hear things that cannot be explained. What you choose to do with them is your concern. What they choose to do with you, that is another matter entirely. Some places exist because humans built them. Some places exist in spite of humans. And some places, the oldest places, the places that predate the concept of place, exist for reasons that have nothing to do with humans at all. We are merely the most recent creatures to stumble into them. We are to Vithara, very new arrivals. And Vithara has been waiting. Her name was Maya Okonkwo, and she was 34 years old, and she had never thought of herself as the kind of person things happen to. That's important. That's the thing about people like Maya, and there are a lot of them, more than you'd think. They go through their whole lives watching the extraordinary happen to other people. On the news, in books, in the kinds of stories their grandmother used to tell around a low fire. But not to them. Never to them. They are ordinary in the best possible way. They make their coffee in the morning. They argue with their husband about whose turn it is to take the recycling out. They fall asleep watching the kind of television that requires absolutely nothing from them. Maya Okonkwo fell asleep on a Tuesday. That was where it started. An ordinary Tuesday in November, gray sky, cold that hadn't quite committed to cold yet. The kind of day that makes you feel vaguely cheated but you can't say why. She worked from home. She edited instructional content for a software company that made project management tools. She was, by her own cheerful admission, extraordinarily good at her job and extraordinarily uninterested in it. She fell asleep on the couch at 2:30 in the afternoon. She'd done it before. Anyone who works from home has done it, the laptop still open, a half-eaten sandwich on the coffee table, the cursor blinking with a kind of patient judgment. Nothing strange about it. Nothing strange at all. Except that when she woke up 40 minutes later, she knew something had changed. Not in the apartment was exactly the same. Same gray afternoon light, same blinking cursor, same sandwich, now slightly less appetizing. No, what had changed was somewhere inside her. Like a door had been opened in a room she hadn't known existed, and something had walked through it, and it had very carefully, very deliberately left the door open on its way out. She didn't remember the dream right away. Dreams are like that, they retreat fast, like something that doesn't want to be seen in full light. But she knew she'd been somewhere specific. A town, streets made of a dark stone she didn't have a name for, the smell of something old and damp, and a church. The spire bent east. She thought about it for the rest of the afternoon. By evening, when her husband Daniel came home from work smelling of the city and talking about his commute, she'd almost convinced herself it was nothing. Almost. But at dinner, over pasta she'd made mostly on autopilot, she found herself saying, quietly, not quite meaning to, "Have you ever dreamed of a town you've never been to?" Daniel looked up from his plate. He had that expression he got sometimes, careful, a little cautious. When he thought she was going somewhere he wasn't sure he wanted to follow. "Sure," he said. "Everyone does, don't they?" "A specific town," she said. "One with a church. The spire leans east." The fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "Why?" he said. And the way he said it, just that one word, just why, in that very particular tone of someone who is trying very hard to sound like they don't know the answer. That was the moment Maya understood that her Tuesday was not going to be ordinary after all. That none of her days from here on were going to be ordinary again. Daniel set his fork down, carefully, like it was suddenly fragile, or he was. "I've dreamed of a church," he said. "Spire that goes a little crooked, east. Yeah," he paused. "How long have you had it?" "First time was today," Maya said. "You?" 3 years, Daniel said. She looked at him across the dinner table they'd bought together at a furniture store on a Saturday morning. The kind of Saturday morning that feels utterly permanent when you're living it. And she tried to process what he'd just told her. 3 years. He had been dreaming of this place for 3 years and had never mentioned it. Not once. Not a single Tuesday morning over coffee. "Hey, weird thing. I keep having this dream," nothing. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. He got up from the table and walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the street. Their street. The street they'd lived on for 6 years. The street she could navigate in complete darkness, and he said, "Because I didn't want it to be real." She understood that. She understood it completely and immediately. The way you understand something that's always been true but you've never had the language for. Some things you don't say out loud because saying them out loud is a kind of invocation, like you're calling it toward you. "What happens in your dream?" she asked. He turned from the window. In the kitchen light, he looked older than she expected. There were lines around his eyes she noticed now that she couldn't remember noticing before. "I walk through the town," he said. "It's always evening. Not dark, just that specific quality of light before dark. Everything is very quiet. There's water running somewhere under the street, I can hear it. And there are people, but—" He stopped. "But," she said, "they don't look at me, not once, not any of them. They're going about their business, walking, talking to each other, that kind of thing, but whenever I try to get close enough to see their faces, they're already turned away. Always." He came back to the table and sat down. He didn't pick his fork back up. "Every single time. And the church is at the end of the main street. I've never gone in. Every time I get close, the dream ends." Maya was quiet for a moment. "The spire," she said. "Does it feel?" "Deliberate," he said. She hadn't been going to say that. She'd been going to say wrong, but deliberate was better. Deliberate was exactly right. They sat with that for a while, the pasta going cold between them. Outside, the November street was doing its usual nothing. Cars passing. A dog barking somewhere. The perfectly ordinary, perfectly relentless machinery of a normal evening in a normal city. What Maya would remember later, not that night but weeks later, when things had gotten considerably less normal, was that it had been exactly then, in that exact moment of silence, that she had heard it for the first time. So faint she almost argued herself out of it. Water running beneath the floor. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor. There were no pipes directly beneath them. They didn't sleep in the same bed that night. Not because they argued, they didn't. They were the kind of couple that argued about recycling and restaurant choices, and whose turn it was to call the landlord about the heating, not about this. There was nothing to argue about. But when 10 o'clock came and Daniel said he was tired and Maya said she'd be up in a bit, they both understood something was different. Some unspoken negotiation was happening. Some mutual decision made without words. Maya sat on the couch until past midnight. The television was on, but she wasn't watching it. She was thinking about Vethara. She didn't have the name yet. That would come later, but she was thinking about the place the way you think about a person you've just met and already know is going to change your life, with a mixture of excitement and something darker. Something that lives in the same neighborhood as dread but isn't quite the same thing. She got out her laptop. Not for work, the project management documents could wait. They could always wait. That was the one mercy of her job, that nothing about it was ever urgent. She opened a browser and typed, "Recurring dream, same town, different people, church spire east." The results were not what she expected. She had expected maybe a Reddit thread. Some amateur dream interpretation forum, maybe a sleep science article that would give her a comfortable, clinical explanation, shared dream imagery, common architectural archetypes in REM sleep, the usual soothing noise of science trying to put a box around something that won't fit in a box. What she found instead was a forum she'd never heard of. Obscure, the design looked like something from 2009 and hadn't been updated since. But it was active, desperately, disturbingly active. Hundreds of posts, thousands of replies, and they were all about the same place. The same church, the same eastward lean, the same sound of water under the street, the same people who would not show their faces. She read for 2 hours, post after post after post. A woman in Nairobi who'd been dreaming of the town since she was 7 years old. A retired engineer in Saskatchewan who built an architectural model of the main street from memory. A teenager in South Korea who claimed she'd managed to get inside the church, who said the interior was wrong in a way she couldn't describe, that the geometry of the space didn't add up, that the nave seemed longer on the inside than the building could contain from outside. And then, buried in one of the longer threads, a post from a user called Dr. M. Salberg, posted 14 months ago. "I have been studying this for 8 years. What I can tell you, what I am prepared to say here, where it cannot be peer-reviewed, is that the town is not a product of collective dreaming. The dreaming is a product of the town. The causality runs the other way. Whatever Vethara is, it is generating the dreams, not the other way around. It is reaching. I don't know why. I don't know what it wants. I do know it is getting better at it. The number of dreamers is increasing, not slowly, exponentially. Get out of it if you can. Once you go inside the church, I don't believe you can. The post had 847 replies. The user had never posted again. Maya closed the laptop. The apartment was quiet. From the bedroom, she could hear Daniel breathing slow, even the sound of deep sleep. She hoped he wasn't there. The next morning, Daniel remembered nothing. Or he said he remembered nothing. Maya had learned enough about him in 8 years of marriage to know the difference between genuine blankness and the performed blankness of someone who doesn't want to say what they know. She told him about the forum, about Dr. Sahlberg's post, about the 8 years of research and the exponential increase, and the part about the church. He listened over breakfast, toast, and coffee, ordinary things, anchoring things, and when she was done he said, "Maybe we should stop talking about it." She stared at him. "I don't mean pretend it isn't happening," he said. "I just mean you know how it goes with this stuff. The more you think about it, the more it shows up. Anxious dreams and all that. You start reading about a dream, you start having it." "Daniel," she said, "you've been having it for 3 years." "Right," he said, "and I mostly kept it contained. By not," he gestured vaguely, "feeding it." She wanted to argue. She had arguments lined up, good ones, organized ones. But she looked at his face across the table and something stopped her. Not the arguments themselves. It was the look on his face, not closed off or dismissive. Scared. Underneath the reasonableness, underneath the good morning coffee and toast normalcy he was performing so carefully, Daniel Okonkwo was frightened in a way she had never seen in 8 years of knowing him. So she said, "Okay." And they talked about other things. And she went to her desk and opened her project management documents. And the cursor blinked with its patient judgment. And outside, November continued its gray and non-committal performance. And everything looked from the outside exactly as it had always looked. But that night, their first night back in the same bed, their careful peace reestablished, Maya lay in the dark with her eyes open and listened. And at some point very late from somewhere beneath the bedroom floor, she heard it again. Water, not the sound of pipes, not the sound of anything with a mechanical explanation. Water running over stone, old stone, purposeful water going somewhere it needed to be. She did not wake Daniel. She lay there and stared at the ceiling and thought about a church with a spire that bent east like something guilty, and she made herself a quiet, private promise. She would go to the church. In the dream, she would go inside. Whatever was in there, whatever geometry existed that shouldn't, whatever wrong interior waited, she would see it. She didn't understand, not yet, that Vethara had already heard that promise. That it had, in fact, been waiting for it. Sleep came for her at last, soft and warm and terribly welcoming, like a hand extended in the dark. She took it. The house was quiet when Maya woke. This was not unusual. Daniel left early, 6:30 most mornings, sometimes earlier. She was used to waking to silence. She had always liked silence, or thought she had. The particular silence of the apartment in the morning, the particular quality of its emptiness. It had always felt like space, like room to breathe. Now it felt like something else. She couldn't say what precisely. Nothing had moved. Nothing was out of place. The bedroom was exactly the bedroom, the dresser in its corner, Daniel's reading glasses on his nightstand, the print they'd bought in Portugal on the wall, the woman in it looking slightly away from the viewer as she'd always looked. Except the woman in the print was looking slightly more away than usual. Maya blinked, looked again. The print was the same. Of course it was. It was paint on canvas behind glass in a frame. It did not change. She knew that. She turned away from it and went to the kitchen and made coffee, and by the time the coffee was done, she had stopped thinking about the print entirely. She sat at her desk. The project management documents were open where she'd left them. The work was exactly as interesting as it always was, which was not very. She typed. The building made its ordinary building sounds around her, the elevator, a distant door, the faint percussion of someone's music from the floor above. The building had always made these sounds. She had never noticed them as much as she noticed them now. At 11 o'clock, she went to pour a second cup of coffee and noticed the kitchen chair. It had been moved. Not dramatically, no grand theatrical displacement, just a few inches from where it usually sat, angled slightly toward the window instead of the table, as if someone had sat in it to look outside and hadn't pushed it back properly. She stood looking at it for a long time. Daniel had left at 6:30. He would not have had coffee in the kitchen. He made his coffee in a travel mug and took it with him. And she had come straight from the bedroom to the desk. She had not been in the kitchen since last night. She pushed the chair back to its usual place. She went back to work. She did not think about it again until 3 in the afternoon when she went to the kitchen for a glass of water and found the chair had moved again. Same direction, same angle, toward the window, as if someone sat there regularly in the mornings while she slept and watched the street below with a patience she could not account for. She looked at the window for a long time. The street was doing nothing unusual. People walking, a delivery van, the large old tree on the corner losing its last November leaves with a kind of dignified resignation. She called Daniel. He didn't answer. She left a voicemail that she deleted immediately, because listening to her own voice say the words, "I think something has been sitting in our kitchen chair," made her feel something she did not want to feel. She made her coffee and went back to work. When Daniel came home that evening, she didn't mention the chair. She wasn't sure why. It seemed excessive. It seemed like the kind of thing that sounds wrong out loud. Not frightening, just wrong. Off the way a note played slightly flat is off. You notice it, you wince. You do not necessarily know why. She cooked dinner. They talked about his day. She laughed at something he said. It was a good evening, a normal evening. The chair was in the right place all night. The forum post she'd found, Dr. Sahlberg's post, had had a thread attached to it, a long one. She went back to it the next day when Daniel was at work and the chair was in its right place, and the woman in the Portuguese print was looking the correct amount away. She read carefully this time. The forum users had a taxonomy. They'd been comparing notes for long enough to have developed a shared vocabulary, the way explorers of new territory eventually name the rivers and the mountains. The stages of dreaming, Vethara had names. The approach, the first dream or the first several, walking the streets, smelling the stone smell, hearing the water. Passive, you are a visitor. The town presents itself. The people do not look at you. The familiarity, this was the second stage. You begin to know the streets without being shown them. You know which alley leads to the market square, which street narrows before opening into the residential lanes. You know things you were not taught. A user named Hazel W, posting from what appeared to be somewhere in northern England, based on the phrasing, had written, "It's like remembering a place you've never been. Not learning, remembering." The invitation, this was where it changed. The people begin to acknowledge you, not fully, not with faces, but in small ways. A nod, a slight pause in their conversation as you pass. Once, Hazel W wrote, one of them had extended a hand toward her. She had not taken it. She had woken up immediately after with no sense that waking had been her own choice. And then there was the fourth stage. The forum had no clean name for it. They called it different things. The inside, or the crossing, or simply after church. There were only 4 accounts of it. 4 users who claimed to have entered the church. 3 of them had stopped posting after the first account. Just stopped. No goodbye, no explanation, no final message. The threads they'd contributed to simply ended mid-conversation. The fourth, username Peer0, had posted twice after. The first post was almost incoherent. The second was very short. The inside of the church is the outside of something else. I don't know how to explain that. I've been trying for 3 weeks and I don't know how to explain that. The spire looks east from inside too. It shouldn't look east from inside. There is something in the nave that I think is praying. I don't think it has a direction it faces when it prays. I think it faces all directions at once. I think it knows I saw it. I have not been able to sleep since. I mean this literally. I have not slept in 22 days. No posts after that. Maya closed the forum. The apartment hummed around her. The building made its building sounds. The woman in the Portuguese print looked slightly away. Maya thought, Daniel has been in the approach stage for 3 years. She thought, I reached familiarity on my second dream last night. I knew where the market square was before I got there. She thought, I am moving faster than he did. She didn't know if that was because she was more susceptible or because Vethara was more interested. She wasn't sure which possibility was more frightening. She went to the kitchen and stood at the window and looked down at the street for a long time, the way someone might sit in a chair and look, if they were there when you weren't. Nothing looked back. That, she had begun to understand, meant very little. She told a friend. She called her friend Priya, who worked in mental health services and was the kind of person you tell things to when you want to be told those things are normal. Priya was reliably excellent at this. I keep having a recurring dream, Maya said. Very detailed, very consistent. Lots of people have those, Priya said. She was washing up, Maya could hear the water. The same place every time. Very common, actually, Priya said. Particularly when you're under stress. You build a kind of internal architecture. The mind likes to return to familiar structures. My husband has been having the same dream. A brief pause. The same, identical. Yes. Well, that's unusual. But you talk about your dreams, presumably. Dream sharing is a documented phenomenon. Your mind incorporates. He didn't tell me about it. I found out accidentally, and he'd been having it for 3 years without saying anything. Another pause, longer. The water had stopped. Maya, is Daniel, is everything all right between you two? She almost laughed. Yes, we're fine, that's not what this is, she hesitated. There's a forum, hundreds of people, all describing the same place. Priya was quiet. Priya, I'm here, I'm thinking. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that shared delusional frameworks can propagate very effectively through online communities, Priya said carefully. I'm thinking that you may have been primed by what you read, that it may be influencing your dreams. I found the forum after the dream. The silence on the other end of the line had a particular quality to it. Maya recognized it. It was the silence of someone who has run out of comfortable explanations and is deciding whether to look for more or simply change the subject. Get some sleep, Priya said finally. Proper sleep, and Maya, stay off the forum. They hung up. Maya looked around the apartment, the ordinary afternoon light, the open laptop, the coffee going cold. She noticed the plant on the windowsill, a small fern she'd had for 2 years, reliable, unfussy. It had turned away from the window. Plants turn toward light. They do not turn away from it. She did not touch the plant. She went back to her desk. She opened the project management documents and stared at them for a long time and typed nothing. That night she dreamed of Vethara. She was at the end of the main street. The church was very close. The spire bent east against a sky the color of old bone. Someone in the crowd, for the first time, turned and looked directly at her. She could not see the face. It was not that the face was obscure. It was that the face was a different kind of thing than a face, and her sleeping mind simply could not process it in that way. But she felt with absolute certainty that it knew her name. She woke up before she learned what it intended to do with that information. The plant was turned back toward the window. She did not find this reassuring. November 14, 2019, National Sleep Foundation Symposium, Washington, D.C. Dr. Harriet Embeke presenting, Neuroscience Faculty, Johannesburg University. Slide 7 of her presentation, Anomalous Cross-Cultural Dream Convergence, a preliminary analysis of 312 reported cases. The paper was scheduled for 20 minutes. It ran 12. The Q&A was cut short. The slide showed a composite map, not a geographic map, a topographic rendering of described dream locations, assembled from written testimonies collected between 2014 and 2019. Street layouts, building footprints, approximate heights, all sourced from people who had never met, never compared notes, never accessed the same online communities. The map matched, not approximately, not within a margin of error, it matched. Dr. Embeke's paper was not included in the published symposium proceedings. She was informed of this by email 7 days after the event. No explanation was provided. She has made the paper available privately upon request. As of the date of this recording, she has received over 4,000 requests. That same month, Dr. Yuki Harada, Sleep Laboratory, Osaka University, publishes a brief paper in a minor neurological journal. The paper documents something she calls synchronous theta wave architecture, a specific pattern of brainwave activity occurring during REM sleep. This pattern had been recorded previously in 79 subjects. All 79 reported the same dream location. The pattern was, and this is Harada's word, not ours, transmitted from an external source, not generated by the sleeping brain, received by it. The paper was retracted 6 weeks later due to methodological concerns. Dr. Harada disputed the retraction. The dispute was not resolved. She no longer works at Osaka University. January 3, 2020. A community forum post, "We are withholding the specific URL," by a user who identified himself as a former employee of a U.S. federal sleep research facility. The post was deleted within 2 hours. Screenshots were preserved. The relevant section reads as follows: "We have been tracking the signal, and I am calling it a signal because that is the closest word we have since 2007. It is not neurological in origin. We have established this definitively. The architecture of the dream does not arise from the brain of the dreamer. It is externally sourced. The location, whatever it is actively transmitting. The range of transmission has increased measurably every year since we began monitoring. In 2007, we estimated approximately 4,000 active dreamers worldwide. Current estimate, as of Q3 2019, 847,000. Rate of increase, nonlinear. The curve has begun to steepen significantly in the past 18 months. 2 hours after posting, gone. The username, retired GVT sleep. Never posted again. IP traced to a residential address in suburban Maryland. The address has since changed ownership twice. Current residents report no knowledge of any prior occupant with those initials. March 22, 2020. A researcher in Edinburgh, we are withholding her name at her request, submits a Freedom of Information request to the UK government regarding documented anomalous shared dreaming phenomena. The request is declined under Section 26 of the Freedom of Information Act, information relating to national security. National security. A dream. The declination letter is a matter of public record. We have a copy. February 2021, Crestview, Oregon, population 1,200. Over a period of 6 weeks, 17 residents independently reported the same dream to the same family physician, Dr. Robert Calais. He documented them without initially knowing about each other's reports, standard patient confidentiality. It was only in week 6, when the 8th patient described the church spire, that he began to understand what he was looking at. He called the county health office. They referred him to a state mental health liaison. The liaison visited, interviewed 3 of the 17, determined there was no public health concern, filed a report that does not mention shared dreaming at all. The report cites elevated community anxiety during pandemic-related isolation as the probable cause of the similarities. Dr. Calais kept his own notes. He gave us access to them, the relevant part. Patient 4 and patient 11 have never met. Patient 4 is 67, retired, lives alone. Patient 11 is 19, college student, home for the semester. They described the same alley between the baker's shop and what patient 4 called the old man's house with the green door. Patient 11 called it the green door house. Same details. Cracked stone on the left wall, smell of bread but wrong somehow, stale bread maybe or old bread. A sound from beneath the alley. Water. Both said water. Patient 9 is 7 years old. That last line has no follow-up. Calais didn't elaborate. When we asked, he said, "She described things children shouldn't know how to describe, in language children don't use." He paused. She said, "The town wants me to come back. It said so, not with words, with the feeling." Patient 9's name is withheld. She is now 9. Her parents have requested she not be contacted. April 2021. A man in rural Hungary. No name available. He spoke to a Hungarian blogger who has since removed the post. Translated summary. The man claimed to have attempted to geographically locate Vethara using techniques drawn from lucid dreaming practice. He claimed to have succeeded partially. He said the town existed at a location he described as not on the surface but adjacent to the surface, like a fold, like pressing your finger into a piece of fabric and the fabric dips but doesn't break. He said the fold was located in a specific geographic region. He named the region. We are not naming the region. We contacted 2 people who investigated the named region independently. One stopped responding to our messages. The other responded once, 6 weeks after their visit. They said they were fine. They said everything was normal. They said to stop contacting them. They said their dreams had been very quiet lately. That one worried us the most. October 2022, Amsterdam, a sleep clinic. 12 patients admitted over 3 weeks, not for the dream, for what happened after it. The clinic's intake forms list the presenting complaint for all 12 as chronic somnambulism with self-injurious behavior. The behavior was this. The patients were found in the same position every time they were discovered, standing facing east, arms at their sides, eyes open, unresponsive. One was found on the street outside their home, barefoot, at 3:40 a.m. in October rain, standing facing east. One was found at the end of their apartment building's hallway, facing east. One was found at the window. All 12 reported, upon waking, that they had been in Vethara, that they had been walking toward the church. Sleep medicine specialist Dr. Annelies Voss treated all 12. Her formal diagnosis, parasomnia with atypical orientation behavior. Her private notes, obtained with her cooperation, after she left clinical practice 18 months later, say, "I cannot explain the east orientation. There is no neurological basis for consistent directional preference during somnambulistic episodes. I have reviewed every case in the literature. There is no precedent. What I believe, and I put this here because I cannot put it anywhere that would be read by anyone who might act on it, is that they are being directed. Something is telling their bodies which way to face. Something is pointing them toward it. I believe it is patient. I believe it is practiced. I believe it has been doing this for a very long time. I also believe the number 12 is not a coincidence. 12. At one clinic in one city in 3 weeks. How many clinics? How many cities? How many weeks? She stopped practicing in March 2024. She declined to tell us why. She declined to tell us where she was living now. The phone call lasted 3 minutes. At the end of it, she said very quietly, "Don't look east. Don't face east when you sleep." Then she hung up. One of the Amsterdam 12, a man whose intake form gives his age as 34 and his occupation as logistics coordinator. was found on the final night before his discharge, standing in the center of the clinic's fourth-floor corridor, facing east, eyes open, unresponsive, standard presentation. Except this time, other patients reported hearing him speak, not words any of them recognized. A low, rhythmic sound, like incantation, one said. Like he was reciting something learned by heart, another said. Careful pronunciation, not his own language. Not any language they could identify. When he woke, he said he remembered nothing. He was discharged the next morning. He has not responded to any contact attempts since. His discharge notes say, in Dr. Voss's handwriting, he smiled when I told him he was free to go. He has not smiled since admission. He smiled in a way I had not seen him smile. He smiled like someone who had been given permission. Maya stopped sleeping. Not immediately, it wasn't that dramatic. She didn't make a decision or lie there rigid with terror. She just started finding reasons. She'd work a little later, watch one more episode, read for a while. And then it would be 1 in the morning, and then 2, and then 3, and she'd feel the particular dizzy softness of deep tiredness that is almost pleasant when you're fighting through it, like wading through warm water, and she'd think, just a bit longer. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. He was a noticing kind of person. It was one of the things she'd loved about him first, 8 years ago, how carefully he paid attention. You're not sleeping, he said, on a Saturday morning, not an accusation, just an observation. He put coffee in front of her. I'm fine, she said. Maya, I'm fine, I've been working late, getting ahead of things. He looked at her. She looked back. The thing about being married to a noticing kind of person was that lying to them required energy she didn't always have. It's the dream, he said. I don't want to talk about it. If you're afraid to sleep because of the dream. I said I don't want to talk about it. He sat down across from her. Saturday morning in November, they would normally have gone to the market, bought cheese and bread, had the kind of uncomplicated morning that feels like a reward for being an adult who has assembled a decent life. Instead, they sat across their kitchen table, and the chair was in the right position, and outside it had started to rain. Last week, Daniel said, when I had it, I was closer to the church. She looked up. Closer than I'd ever been, he said. And someone looked at me, first time in 3 years, and I could see not the face exactly, but I could see it was moving. Its mouth was moving, and I think he stopped, started again. I think it was saying my name. The rain, the kitchen, the chair in its right position. Which direction did you face when you woke up? Maya asked. He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know, he said. I don't know which direction I was facing when I woke up. But he did know. She could see that he knew. She could see it in the way he looked at the window, at the gray November rain, at the street, at the east end of the street where the big tree was losing its leaves, with something that wasn't quite dread. Something that was almost like recognition. She called in sick on Monday. Not because she felt sick. She felt alert, over-alert, the specific jagged wakefulness of someone who has been running on 4 hours of sleep for a week and has become adapted to it. She called in sick because she needed the day. She needed to think. She went back to the forum. Dr. Sahlberg's thread had grown since she'd last checked it. New users, new testimonies, new data points accumulating in the messy, urgent way of people who need to compare notes and have nowhere else to go. She read for hours. She made notes in a composition book, actual physical notes, handwritten because she didn't want this on any device, didn't want it backed up in any cloud, didn't want it anywhere it could be accessed or indexed or traced. What she assembled over the course of that Monday was a kind of rough chronology, not of individual testimonies, there were too many for that, but of patterns, of the dream's behavior over time. Before 2010, reports were rare, isolated. Individual dreamers who mostly assumed they were alone, whose testimonies surfaced only in diaries and letters in the occasional archived forum post from the early internet years. The town they described was consistent, the same stone, the same church, the same water, but the experience was mostly passive. You walked, you observed, the residents ignored you. 2010-015, frequency increased. Reports became more clustered, not geographically but temporally. Peaks of new dreamers that seemed to coincide with nothing in particular. No shared geographic locations, no common events, no detectable common trigger. Just sudden surges of new people arriving in Vethara for the first time. And the dream itself changing, the residents becoming more active. The first reports of them turning. The first reports of name speaking. 2015-2020, acceleration. Dr. Mbeki's 312 cases were just the cases she could document. The forum estimated tens of thousands, and the dream had developed what one frequent poster called persistence, the feeling of continuity between dreams, as if Vethara existed between your visits, and you were merely returning to a place that had continued without you. Users reported finding things different from visit to visit. Streets they'd seen before, but new buildings appearing. An alley that hadn't been there. And the church, always the church, as if it were the fixed point around which everything else orbited. Post 2020, the Amsterdam cases, the orientation behavior. The first users reporting they could hear Vethara while awake. Not clearly, not like hearing a voice, more like a signal on the edge of reception. A frequency your brain could almost tune to. A sound that wasn't quite sound. Maya put her pen down. She looked at what she'd written. The composition book lay on the table between her empty coffee mug and the window with its November rain. The signal was getting stronger. She knew this the way she knew the sound of water under the floor, not because she could prove it, not because she had evidence a scientist would accept, but because her body knew it. The way your body knows a storm is coming before the barometer changes. The way your body knows, when you turn a corner on a street you've never walked, that something is waiting on the other side. Something was coming. Not toward her exactly. She was moving toward it. They both were, she and Daniel, and the 847,000, and however many more had found the town since that number was counted. All of them walking down that same main street, toward the same church, the spire leaning east like an accusation. She slept that night. Not because she stopped being afraid, because she was too tired. The body has its limits, and Maya's body had reached them somewhere around 2 in the morning, and sleep came for her while she was still sitting up in bed with the composition book in her lap. She didn't dream of falling asleep. She just stopped being awake. And then she was in Vethara. It was different. That was the first thing she noticed. The quality of it had changed. Before, there had been a kind of membrane between her and the place, a slight remove, the way you feel in a film when the camera is between you and the scene. Now there was no membrane. The cold air of the street hit her face with actual physical substance. The stone smell wasn't something she was observing, she was breathing it. When she looked down at her hands, they were her hands, not dream hands. Not the approximate impression of hands, her actual hands, with the small scar on her left index finger from a cooking accident 4 years ago. She was more there than she'd ever been. The town was evening lit, the sky its usual old bone color. The street was populated, more populated than before. The residents were closer, still not facing her, still conducting their conversations and their movements with their backs carefully turned, but closer. The margin of distance that separated her from them had narrowed. Whether that was her moving toward them or them moving toward her, she couldn't say. The church was at the end of the street. She walked toward it. She had decided she was going to walk toward it. This was the plan, this was what she'd promised herself. And she was keeping the promise, and her legs were cooperating, which felt like a small victory. The spire bent east against the bone-pale sky. She was 20 feet from the church door when the hand landed on her shoulder. She froze. The hand was there, real, physical, present, and she could feel the individual pressure of each finger through the fabric of her jacket. A firm grip, not violent, not restraining, the grip of someone who wants you to stop and listen. She turned. It was Daniel, not Dream Daniel, Daniel, her Daniel, with the same lines around his eyes she'd noticed in the kitchen light, wearing the same gray sweatshirt he'd gone to bed in. He was standing in the street of Vethara looking at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. It took her a moment to name it. Grief. Don't go in, he said. Daniel, please don't go in. His hand tightened on her shoulder. Something happened when I got close last week. I can't explain it, but something spoke to me, Maya. Not my name, not words. Something. He stopped, swallowed. It showed me something, what's inside, and I've been trying to forget it since, and I can't. And I can't tell you what it is because I don't have words for it. I don't have a shape for it that fits in language, but I need you to. He stopped. The crowd around them had gone still. Every single one of them, all the residents, all the carefully turned backs were still. The sound of the water under the street was very loud now, very clear. And very slowly, in perfect unison, every single resident of Vethara turned around. Maya woke up. She was standing in the hallway, facing east. Daniel was still in bed. She did not wake him. She went back to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and breathed until the breathing was regular. Then she wrote in the composition book, "It can put us in the same dream. That's new. That means it wanted us to meet there." She told Daniel in the morning. All of it, the shared dream, the residents turning, him being there, what he'd said. She watched his face as she talked and watched it do something complicated. Relief and fear braided together, the specific expression of someone who has been carrying something alone for too long and is being offered help, but isn't sure the help is safe to accept. When she finished, he said, "I was there." "I know. I was asleep here," he said. "But I was there, both at the same time." "Yes." He was quiet for a while. Then, "Did I really say it showed me something?" "Yes." He looked at his hands. They were steady. Daniel's hands were always steady. He was that kind of person, reliable, contained. They were steady now, but they didn't look like they wanted to be. "I need to tell you something," he said. "And I need you to not try to fix it or explain it. I need you to just listen." She nodded. "When I got close to the church last week," he said, "something came to the door. Not from inside the church, the door didn't open, but something came to the door, and it pressed itself against the door from the inside so I could see the shape of it in the wood, like pressing your face against a curtain. And the shape." He stopped. "The shape wasn't a person," he said. "It was big, much bigger than the door, which is impossible because whatever it was should have been visible outside the building. If it was that large, you should be able to see something that size through the building, but you couldn't. It was only there in the impression on the door, and it stayed there for a long time, and then he stopped again. It made a sound through the door, through the wood, this sound that I can't." He looked at her and she saw it again, the grief, the expression she'd seen on his face in the dream. "It sounded," he said slowly, "like it was glad." The November morning was very ordinary around them. Daylight, coffee, the building making its building sounds. "We should leave the apartment," Maya said. "And go where?" Daniel said. She didn't have an answer, because she understood, with the complete cold clarity that had been building in her all week, that there was nowhere to go. Vethara was not a location. It was not a place you could put distance between yourself and. It was in the architecture of sleep, and sleep was inescapable, and all they had managed to do so far was delay the moment when the door would open. Not the moment, a moment, because the door was not in the church. The door, she understood now, had never been in the church. The door was in her. In Daniel. In every one of the 847,000. Vethara was not a place you entered. It was a place that entered you. I must set down what I know, what I believe I know, though I confess, as I have confessed to no other living soul, that the boundary between knowledge and madness has grown, of late, somewhat indistinct. I did not begin this as a woman who questioned her mind. I was not that kind of woman. I ate well. I slept adequately, or I slept adequately, at any rate, before all of this began. I exercised 3 times a week with the mechanical self-discipline of someone who believes that the body, properly maintained, will keep the mind in its proper place. I had reasons for things. I had always had reasons for things. The reasons are not behaving as they used to. I find myself in the daylight hours listening, not for anything in particular, or rather, for something in particular that I cannot name. The water beneath the floor of things. It is not always there, but when it is there, and it is there more than it was, more than it should be, more than my explanation for it, I become very still. The way an animal becomes still when it hears a sound in the dark. The way a creature becomes still. When it knows, without understanding how it knows, that something larger than itself is nearby. The chair moves. I have documented this. I have stopped documenting this because documenting it lends it a reality that I find it requires too much for me to sustain. To write the chair moved again 11:40 a.m. approximately 4 inches the same direction, east. To write that is to commit it to a record that exists outside of my mind. And then I must ask myself, if it exists outside of my mind, what is moving it? And if something is moving it, what is the nature of that something? And if the nature of that something is what I have begun to believe it to be, if it has followed me, followed us from that place, if the boundary I had assumed existed between Vethara and this apartment has proven to be no boundary at all. But I do not think that. I refuse to think that. I had reasons for things. Daniel sleeps. He sleeps too easily, I have begun to feel. He goes to bed at 10 o'clock and he sleeps, and in the morning he is fine. He says he is fine. He does not report the water sound. He does not report the chair. He reports his dreams when I ask, with a careful neutrality, as if reporting the weather in a distant city. A bit closer to the church, he will say, or the light was different. He speaks of Vethara as though it were a commute, something inconvenient but navigable, something one endures. I do not experience it as something one endures. I experience it as something that is enduring me. The residents have faces now, or not faces, the possibility of faces, as if their faces exist in a state that requires my observation to collapse into a definite form. And I do not want to be the observation that collapses them. I do not want to look. I have been in this dream, a woman who does not look, who keeps her eyes forward on the church, on the spire that points east like an accusation she cannot answer. But last night something was different. Last night in Vethara, I had the unshakable conviction that I was not alone in the way I am usually not alone there, not alone in the way of a visitor in a populated town. I was alone in the way of a specimen in a laboratory. I was alone in the way that something was watching me specifically, taking notes, measuring. And I heard very distinctly, inside the dream, water. Not under the street. Under me. She stopped writing in the composition book. She didn't make a decision to stop. The decision made itself, the way some decisions do, quietly, in the background, without announcement. One night she put the book down, and the next night she didn't pick it up, and after that it sat on the nightstand with the pen resting on top of it, and she didn't touch it. Some things are better left unrecorded. The apartment was quiet. It was quiet a lot these days. Not uncomfortably, or not only uncomfortably. There was another quality to the quiet that she couldn't name, something patient in it, something that seemed to be waiting for her to reach a decision she hadn't quite reached yet. She was on the couch. It was past midnight. The television was off. The city outside did its city things, indifferent and eternal. She thought, I have been afraid for 3 weeks and the fear has not resolved into anything. It has only deepened. It has become structural, part of the load-bearing framework of how she moved through her days. She thought, there are thousands of others who feel this. Right now, tonight, in apartments and houses and student rooms and rural kitchens, people are sitting up past midnight because sleep has become complicated. Because a town they've never seen is more real to them than the rooms they live in. Because something has found them, something enormous and patient, and so far beyond the scale of human concern that it does not even recognize human concern as a category. She wanted, suddenly, to know if any of them were awake right now, at this specific hour, whether any of them were sitting in the same posture she was sitting in back of the couch, knees pulled up, the particular held quality of someone who is very carefully not moving, because movement might disturb something. If you're watching this right now, if you've come this far into the dark with us, leave a comment. Just 2 words. The walls are watching. That's all. 2 words. We want to see how many of us are still awake. We want to see who made it this far. Because here's the thing nobody says about Vethara. The thing that the forum posts and the doctor's notes and the clinical records all dance around but never quite say. The people who dream of it, the real ones, the ones who have been there long enough to know the streets by heart, they don't talk about being afraid of it. Not anymore. After a certain point, they talk about it the way you talk about home. The house was quiet, very quiet. Maya looked at the composition book on the nightstand. She thought, I know which alley runs between the baker's shop and the green door house. I know how the light looks on the church at dusk. I know the sound of the water under the main street, and I know that the water is going somewhere, and I have always known, from the first dream, that the church at the end is not a church in any sense that the word is meant. I know these things the way I know my own apartment. She got up, she went to the nightstand, she picked up the composition book, she wrote 1 sentence. She left it there and went to bed. In the morning, Daniel found it and read it and put it back carefully and did not say anything, because there was nothing useful to say. What she had written was, I think I want to go back. There I have said it, or she has said it, though the distinction between she and I has grown, of late somewhat theoretical. Let me be precise. Let me attempt precision, while precision is still available to me as a mode of engagement with reality. The fear has not gone. This is important to establish. The fear has not gone. What has gone, what I must confess has gone in the slow erosion of these past weeks, is the certainty that the fear is the appropriate response, the primary response. Because alongside the fear, growing in the space the fear has worn smooth, is something else. Something I did not anticipate and cannot dismiss with the tools I have historically used for dismissal. Curiosity, pull, the thing that makes you press the bruise. I know the town. I have walked it how many times now? In the hours when the waking world releases me. I know its stones and its evening light and the particular way the water sounds when you stand at the mouth of the alley between the baker's and the green door house. I know these things with an intimacy I have not, I must be honest, I have not achieved with my own street, my own neighborhood, the geography of this city where I have lived for 6 years. Vethara knows me. And God help me, I know Vethara. Is this madness? I ask with genuine curiosity, not the rhetorical affectation of someone who has already decided. Is this what it looks like from the inside when a mind separates from its moorings? Because if it is, I can say that it does not feel the way the literature suggests it should feel. It does not feel like dissolution. It feels like clarification. I think of the researcher, Sahlberg, and her 3 underlined words. It is aware. Yes, it is aware. I have known this from the second dream, the dream where the familiarity arrived, the dream where I knew the alley before I turned the corner. The awareness is not threatening. This is what I failed to understand at the beginning, when I was still inside the framework of threat and not threat, safe and not safe. The awareness is not indifferent either. It is attentive. It is curious about me in the way I have become curious about it. This exchange, this mutual attending does not feel wrong. It feels like being seen. God, listen to me. Listen to what I have become. A woman sitting in her November apartment at 2 in the morning, writing in a composition book about a dream town, arguing with herself about whether she wants to enter a building that a man in Amsterdam began speaking in tongues before, a building from which multiple forum users have not returned. and I am convincing myself that it feels like being seen is a sufficient counterargument. Daniel is asleep. I can hear him, slow and even, going somewhere. The water under the floor tonight is very loud. I do not think I am going to sleep. I think I am wrong about that. I think whatever is in the church, whatever pressed itself against the door, whatever Daniel heard say something glad, I think it has been patient for a very long time. I think it has been patient for longer than the word patient is designed to contain. And I think its patience is, at last, running out. Not because it is angry, because it is ready, because we are ready. And I think, though I would not have said this 3 weeks ago, I would not have been capable of saying this 3 weeks ago, I think it is right. I think the church door is going to open. I think I am going to be on the other side of it. And I think, God help me, that I am going to go. There are certain geometries, certain configurations of space and matter, and something which is neither precisely space nor matter, but which partakes of both qualities in some disturbing combinatorial fashion, that the human visual apparatus, evolved over millions of years to process a world of 3 spatial dimensions and 1 of time, is fundamentally unequipped to render. This is not a poetic statement. It is a statement of architectural fact, documented in the recovered notes of Dr. Maren Solberg, and corroborated by the testimonies of every individual who has proceeded past the threshold of the Vethara Church and retained sufficient cognitive coherence to produce any account at all. The inside of the church is not the inside of the church. This requires explication. The exterior of the structure, the building as perceived from the street, with its slightly improbable eastward-leaning spire, and its facade of the dark stone that no geological survey has ever categorized, presents dimensions consistent with, if somewhat large for, a typical rural European ecclesiastical building of indeterminate but pre-industrial construction. Nave length appears, from exterior observation, to be approximately 22 meters, width approximately 11. The roof pitch is steep and regular. There is nothing about the exterior that should prepare the observer for what the interior contains. What the interior contains, and I am reconstructing this from the 4 available accounts, cross-referenced with Dr. Solberg's theoretical framework and with testimony recovered from the Amsterdam Clinic, is a space that does not end. Not in the metaphorical sense of a vast hall that gives the impression of infinity. In the literal, measurable sense, observers who have entered and attempted to cross the nave have not reached the far wall. They have walked the distance that the exterior dimensions suggest should bring them to the far wall. They have continued walking. The wall has not arrived. The ceiling, meanwhile, is present. The ceiling is at the expected height. And the ceiling, this is the detail that appears in every account without exception, the detail that appears to have lodged itself in the minds of witnesses with the tenacity of something that cannot be unseen. The ceiling is moving, not uniformly, not in any direction that the word movement is strictly designed to accommodate. It is moving in the way that something alive moves when it is at rest, the slow, involuntary movement of breath, of digestion of thought. Because what Vethara is, what the church is not a place in any sense that a geographer or an architect or a theologian would recognize. What Vethara is, what the accumulated research and testimony and horror of 3 years of documentation points toward with an inescapable, terrible consistency, is a mind. A mind of a scale that makes the word mind seem not merely inadequate but almost comically small. The town is a synapse. The streets are pathways. The residents are something I am not prepared to name with confidence, though the word thought presents itself with uncomfortable insistence. And the church at the end of the main street, with its door that opens eastward toward where we are, toward where we sleep, the church is an eye. Not a human eye, not even a biological eye, an organ of attention, of focusing, of finding. Vethara does not dream our dreams. We dream its attention. We are dreamed into clarity by something so vast that the entirety of human civilization represents, on its scale of experience, approximately the duration of a single passing thought. It is not interested in us. We are not interesting to it in the way that any individual creature is interesting to another individual creature. We are interesting to it in the way that the singular neuron is interesting to the brain that contains it, in the way that the word is interesting to the sentence. We are not visitors. We are vocabulary. It is perhaps useful at this juncture to address the question of time. The structure of Vethara, insofar as that structure can be mapped against any framework that human cognition is equipped to engage, does not exist within what we understand as time. This is not a claim of supernatural origin. It is a claim consistent with certain fringe elements of theoretical physics, with the interpretations of quantum cosmology that exist largely outside mainstream discourse, with the kind of thinking that is done in the small hours by people who are very good at mathematics and very bad at accepting the comfortable limits of what their discipline is permitted to ask. The mind, and I will continue to use the word mind with the caveat that it is a concession to the limits of vocabulary, rather than a confident assertion of accurate description. The mind that Vethara represents has been present, in the sense that presence can be attributed to something that does not exist within time, for a duration that renders the entire span of Homo sapiens' neurological history a recent and trivial event. The cave paintings at Lascaux, the first written language of Sumer, the entire narrative of human history, these exist within a sliver of the duration of this presence so thin as to be, in any practical sense of measurement, zero. It was not created. It did not evolve. The categories of creation and evolution require a framework of causally sequenced time that this entity does not inhabit. It simply is and has always simply been in the way that mathematics is, in the way that the laws governing the behavior of matter under gravity are, not constructed, not contingent, simply the case. What has changed? And this is the element that the recovered documentation consistently finds most alarming. This is the element that appears to have motivated Dr. Sahlberg's late-night, underlined private conclusion, is not the entity itself. The entity has not changed. What has changed is its attention. Something in the entity's vast, incomprehensible, time-independent awareness has oriented itself, recently, toward our species, toward the particular frequency of consciousness that sleeping human brains produce, toward us. We do not know why. The question of why implies a motivational framework that may not apply. We do not ask why gravity works as it does, in the sense of what gravity wants. We simply note that it works, and we note its effects, and we arrange our lives around those effects as best we can. What we can say about Vethara's orientation toward human consciousness, what the evidence supports, however reluctantly, is that it is increasing. The dream in its early documented forms was passive. It showed. It allowed observation. The residents, those expressions of the entity's attention that took the form, for human observers of human figures, did not engage. They existed at the edge of engagement. They maintained the careful distance of something that is studying a specimen and does not want to disturb the specimen's natural behavior. That distance is closing. Dr. Sahlberg's exponential curve, from 4,000 dreamers in 2007 to 847,000 in 2019, has continued. We have reason to believe the current figure is significantly higher. We have reason to believe the residents are, now, in the dreams of people who have not chosen to engage, who have not found any forum, who have had no exposure to any account. People who went to sleep in the ordinary way and woke from the ordinary way and did not know what had found them. Vethara is not waiting to be discovered. It has stopped waiting. The door has already been open for a very long time. We just didn't notice. There is, and I have been hesitant to include this, because what follows belongs to the category of evidence that cannot be corroborated, that exists in the margins of what any reasonable documentation standard would admit. There is, Among the recovered materials, one additional item that I will describe now. Dr. Sahlberg, in the 8 years of her research, constructed what she called a transmission map. This was not a geographic map. It was an attempt to chart the distribution of Vethara dreamers against time, not where they were, but when they were. When the dreams began, when the familiarity stage arrived, when the first resident turned. She notes in the accompanying text, attempting to determine whether the transmission, whether the signal that the dreaming mind receives and which produces the experience of Vethara, whether that signal could be reverse traced to a source. She was attempting to find the location of the eye. What she found, after 5 years of data assembly and 3 years of analysis, was not a location. It was a pattern. The dreamers did not receive the signal from a single geographic point. They received it from, she uses the word and crosses it out and writes it again. They received it from below. Not below any specific point on the surface of the earth. Below the surface of things. Below the layer of the real that we are equipped to perceive and engage with. From a depth that has no unit of measurement, because it exists in a dimension for which we have not developed units. She wrote in the margin of her final notes a single phrase that she did not attribute to any source, that appears to be her own formulation, arrived at after 8 years of work. The ground is not the bottom. What is below the ground, below all ground, below the deepest structure of material reality, she did not say, or she could not say. The notes end there, not with a conclusion, not with a summary, not with any of the scholarly apparatus that had organized her work for 8 years. They simply end mid-sentence in the middle of a page. The last word she wrote is a word that appears in no language I have been able to identify. A word that, when read aloud by people who have subsequently come into contact with it, produces in several of them a vivid, detailed dream of Vethara on the following night, even those with no prior exposure to the phenomenon. Even those who read the word in the context of this documentation, fully skeptical, never having heard of the town. I will not reproduce the word here. If you have come this far, if you have listened this closely, if you have followed this account through its accumulation of documented evidence and impossible testimony, and the quiet, mounting horror of a world that is larger than we were told it would be, then you understand, I think, why I will not reproduce the word. Some thresholds once crossed do not allow you back. Some words are doors. Some doors open both ways. Maya did not know about the word. She did not know about Dr. Sahlberg's transmission map, or the phrase written in the margin, or the 5-year analysis that had ended mid-sentence in the middle of a page. She knew only what she had assembled from the forum and her own nights in Vethara, and the composition book that sat on her nightstand with its single damning sentence. I think I want to go back. But there is a sense in which Maya knew everything relevant. There is a sense in which every dreamer of Vethara knows everything relevant, if they allow themselves to attend to what the dream has deposited in them. The knowledge is there, not in the cognitive layers, not in the part of the mind that assembles evidence and draws conclusions, but deeper. In the architecture of the nervous system itself, in the tissue and the signal firing and the electrochemical processes that produce, as a kind of byproduct, the experience of consciousness. The knowledge that had been given to her in those nights in Vethara was not knowledge of the town's geography, although she had that too, in the precise and embodied way of someone who has lived somewhere for years. The knowledge that had been given to her was of a different order. The knowledge that there are things that have always existed alongside human civilization, not above it or below it or outside it, but alongside it, that operate at a scale so different from human concern, that the question of their benevolence or malevolence is as meaningless as asking whether a mountain is kind. The knowledge that Vethara had found her not because she was special, not because she had any quality that made her a more desirable target or a more interesting specimen, but because the attention was spreading, because the eye was open wider than it had ever been open. Because whatever Vethara ultimately was, whatever entity or mind or principle of existence it represented, it was, in the language of its own experience, waking up. It had been asleep for something that the word eons does not adequately contain. And the sound of its waking transmitted through dimensions that have no names, through the layer of reality that underlies what we call reality, through the frequency that sleeping human minds happen to share with the vast and structureless thought of something older than the concept of age, was Vethara. The town, the church, the spire pointing east. We were not being invaded. We were hearing it breathe. And the breathing was becoming very close now. I will go tonight. I have made this decision with a clarity that alarms me, not because the clarity is false, but because it is real, and its realness means that the rational framework within which I have always operated, the framework of cause and effect and evidence and reasonable conclusion, has not produced this decision. This decision comes from somewhere below reason, below language, from the place the water sounds come from, whatever that place is. Daniel must not know. This is also a decision made with the same terrible clarity. Daniel has warned me. In the dream, in the other place, the real place, I cannot stop myself from calling it the real place. He took my shoulder and said, "Do not go in," and I believe he meant it. I believe he was afraid. I believe, furthermore, that he was right to be afraid, and that I am not afraid in the appropriate way, and that my lack of appropriate fear is itself a symptom of something I cannot diagnose because I am inside it. But I will go. Is this what Poe's narrators felt? I wonder, the men who sealed their enemies in casks of wine, who buried their accusers beneath floorboards, who could not explain the action to any external observer because the explanation only made sense from inside the obsession. Is this the internal logic of the unreliable mind, that it is perfectly, immaculately reliable from within its own framework, that every terrible decision looks, from the inside, like a conclusion? I am rational. I have always been rational. I am going to walk into an impossible building in a town that does not exist in order to see what presses itself against the door from the wrong side, the sound it makes, the shape it makes, the way the wood bends under its attention. And I am going to do this because I need to know. Because the not knowing has become a physical thing. It sits on my chest. It is behind my eyes. And beneath all of that, beneath the academic language of need and curiosity and the drive toward understanding, is something I will not yet name but will place here, in this document, so that if anything happens, if something goes wrong, if the person who comes back from the church is not quite the person who entered it, there will be a record of this. I am not going in because I am afraid. I am going in because some part of me, the part that knows the alley between the bakers and the green door house, has already been let in, has already been on the other side of that door, and is calling the rest of me to follow. Something has been let in. Something was let in a long time ago. Perhaps the first night. Perhaps before. Perhaps in some version of things I cannot access from within my waking self. Some negotiation I entered into without knowing I was negotiating. I will go tonight. I will face east in the dark, and I will let it find me, and I will follow it back, and I will open the door. God, listen to what I am writing. God. She writes this. She puts the pen down. She looks at the pen. Outside, the November city has gone very quiet for 3 in the morning. Or perhaps it is only that the water beneath the floor is very loud, louder than it has been. Louder than the pipes could account for, even if there were pipes, which there are not, which she has established by calling the building manager, and the building manager confirming there are no plumbing lines beneath apartment 3C. There are no plumbing lines. The water is not water. She knows what the water is. She has known, perhaps, since the second night, since the familiarity arrived, since the knowledge of the alley settled into her body like something remembered rather than learned. The water is the sound of Vethara's attention, moving, running over the stone of the world's oldest structures, the structures that underlie what we call the world, carrying whatever ancient and purposeful cargo ancient and purposeful water carries. She is going to sleep. She is going to let it find her. And she knows she is rational. She has always been rational. She knows that what she is doing is exactly what the man in Amsterdam did before he began to speak in tongues. Exactly what the forum users did before they stopped posting. Exactly what Dr. M. Sahlberg's warning was intended to prevent. She knows all of this. She goes to the bedroom. Daniel is sleeping. She lies beside him with extraordinary care so as not to wake him with the tenderness of someone performing an act for the last time. She looks at the ceiling. The water sounds. The apartment is dark and quiet except for the water sounds. She thinks, I have been here before, not in this apartment, in this moment, the moment of crossing. Every choice is this moment, the moment where you know what you are about to do and do it anyway. Every irreversible thing contains this moment. She closes her eyes. And there, almost immediately, as if it had been waiting just beyond the border of sleep, as if the border has become very thin indeed, as if the border is more courtesy than reality now, there is the street, the stone smell, the evening light, the water under everything. She is in Vethara. And Vethara is different. For the first time, the residents are not turned away. They are watching her, all of them. Every face turned toward her, and they have faces now. God help her, they have faces, and the faces are not wrong exactly. They are faces of the kind that a very intelligent mind might construct from the description of a face, from the concept of a face, from everything a face is supposed to do and be, constructed with great precision and great care, and deeply, profoundly, irreversibly wrong in some quality she cannot name, cannot hold in language long enough to examine. They are watching her walk toward the church. And they are all of them, the entire populated street of Vethara, every resident, every figure, they are smiling. The door of the church was open. She had not seen it open. In no previous dream, no account, no testimony she had read, the door had never simply been open. It had always been closed. It had been pressed against. It had been described as heavy, immovable, impenetrable. It had been the fixed point of approach and refusal. It had never, in any account, been open. It stood open now. Why? As if the question of entry had been answered already, as if the question had always been answered, as if the asking of it had merely been a formality she had needed to complete before the formality could be set aside. The interior was dark, not dark in the absence of light sense, dark in the sense of something that has its own positive presence, a darkness that exists the way objects exist, with edges and weight and a kind of texture that the eye processes as shadow, but the mind refuses to file under that category. She stepped inside, and the geometry arrived, all at once, like a wave not breaking over her but passing through her, the way a frequency passes through a medium, using the medium to propagate and leaving it slightly altered in its wake. The nave was not 22 meters long. The nave was not any length. The nave was the space that exists when Euclidean constraint is set aside, when the rules that prevent 2 points from being simultaneously adjacent and infinitely separated are quietly, locally suspended. The ceiling moved, the slow breath of something at rest. And at the far end of the nave, the end that was not measurably far because the nave had no measurable end, something was there. She could see it in the way you see something in your peripheral vision that refuses to clarify when you look at it directly. Present, enormous, present in the way of something that is everywhere simultaneously and here with particular intention, and here for her with an attention so complete, so total, so without gradation or reservation, that she felt. She felt known. Every night of her life, every Tuesday of the kind that feels ordinary while you are living it, every argument about recycling and restaurant choices, every morning coffee and blinking cursor and half-eaten sandwich, every year of the 8 years and the person she had been at the beginning of them, and the person she had become, the particular irreducible specific of her. Maya Okonkwo, 34, editor of project management content. Wife, daughter, friend, woman who did not think of herself as the kind of person things happened to. All of it seen, held, known. I know you, said the thing that was not in any direction, and all directions simultaneously. It did not use words, but she heard it. And God help her, God help every single one of us, she answered. What happens when the door opens all the way is this. The body remembers. Before the mind catches up, before conscious processing even begins to attempt the categorization of what is happening, the body remembers what it has always known and spent an entire lifetime refusing to acknowledge. That the thing which looks out through human eyes is not native to the vessel it inhabits. That the meat and the bone are habitation, not origin. That somewhere in the architecture of the nervous system, in the chemical dark of the limbic structures, in the firing patterns that govern what we call intuition, what we call instinct, what we call the feeling of being watched when we are alone, there is a door. The door had always been there. Maya felt it open. Not metaphorically, physically. A sensation in the center of her sternum between the third and fourth ribs, as precise as surgery, as cold as stone in November, a click, or the feeling of a click, of something releasing that had been held shut for 34 years. And through the opening came not light, not darkness, not anything that either word contains. Something that her sensory apparatus tried to process as both simultaneously and produced. As a result of that impossibility, a sensation she could only describe afterward in the brief, vivid, increasingly incoherent notes she made in the composition book in the weeks that followed as beauty. A beauty of the kind that has no interest in whether you survive it. The creature, and she used that word too, though she wrote it with visible uncertainty, the pressure of the pen changing, lightening as if she was not sure she wanted it to be visible. The creature at the end of the nave was aware of her in the way that weather is aware of you, in the way that a fire is aware of wood, not malevolently, not with any intention that would fit inside a moral framework. It was doing what it did. You were the material it did it with. She felt her skin. This is what she wrote. She felt her skin in a way she had never felt it before, as a surface, as a membrane, as the exact location of the difference between inside and outside. And she became aware that the difference was very small and had always been very small, and that whatever was in the nave had crossed that membrane long ago, in some negotiation she had not been conscious of making. The sound it made was not like anything that belonged to the category of sound. It moved through her skeleton the way sound moves through bone, bypassing the eardrum entirely, arriving directly in the nervous system, in the body's own signaling language. And the signal said, "Stay." And she stayed, and the ceiling breathed, and the darkness had weight, and somewhere very far away in the world of project management documents and November rain, and a chair that moved 4 inches eastward, and a husband who slept on his side, Daniel woke up. And the side of the bed where Maya slept was empty. Her body was there. He could see it. He could see her breathing, slow and steady, her face turned toward the ceiling, her eyes closed. But he had been married to her for 8 years, and he knew, the way you know after 8 years, the particular quality of someone's presence in a room, that she was not there. Something else was. He touched her arm. Cold, not the cool of sleep, the cold of something from which heat has been systematically removed, degree by deliberate degree. The cold of a basement in February, the cold of deep water. He pulled his hand back. Her eyes opened. He had wanted, for the past minute since waking, to believe that she was simply dreaming, that the absence he'd felt was his own anxiety, the residue of weeks of bad sleep and disturbing conversation. He had wanted the opening eyes to be Maya's eyes, the particular warm dark of Maya's eyes that he knew better than any other detail of any other face. The eyes that opened were not Maya's. Not in any quality he could point to, not color, not shape, not the physical structure of iris and pupil. Exactly Maya's eyes. The same. But behind them, behind the ordinary, perfect, identifiable architecture of his wife's eyes, something was looking out that had not been there before. Looking out with the specific quality of something that has arrived somewhere after a very long journey and is taking stock. Daniel, she said. His name, his wife's voice. Daniel, it's all right, don't be afraid. And the thing was the thing that he would carry with him, that he wrote down in his own notes later, that he read to us with a steadiness he maintained by visible effort. The thing was that the voice was Maya's, perfectly Maya's, not an approximation, not a performance. The exact cadences, the exact rhythm of the way she said his name, the slight softening on the first syllable that had been a feature of their relationship since before they were married. And yet, what are you, he said, not a question, a statement that needed to be made. She, the thing that wore her face, the thing that spoke in her voice, the thing that had arrived in her while she walked through a door in a town that does not exist, tilted her head at a very slight angle. The angle was wrong, not grotesquely, not dramatically, just slightly wrong the way the spire of the church was slightly wrong, deliberately, precisely wrong. I am what she found, it said. Where is she? Here, it said. She is here, I would not harm her. You are wrong about what I am, Daniel. You have all been wrong about what I am. I am not, it paused, and in the pause something moved behind Maya's eyes, some massive and slow rearrangement like tectonic plates in a body of water. I am not predatory. I am old. I am very old, and I have been, your kind would say, lonely, for a very long time. He stared at it, at her, at the face he knew completely. The bedside clock said 3:47 a.m. The November dark outside was the deepest dark of the year. She went willingly, the thing said, gently. I want you to know that she made a choice. She came to the door and knocked, and I answered. That is not, again the pause, the deep water movement behind the eyes. That is not the action of something monstrous. I think you know that. He did not answer. He looked at Maya's face, at his wife's face, at the face he had kissed 10,000 times, and he reached for something, for anger, for courage, for the particular ferocity that protects what you love, and found, underneath all of it, a question. What does it feel like, he thought, to have been waiting that long? She came back in the morning. He knew the exact moment because the quality of the air in the room changed, something released, something exhaled, and when he looked at her face, the eyes were Maya's again, fully, completely, recognizably hers. She was looking at the ceiling with the expression of someone who has been somewhere far away and is taking stock of what has changed in their absence. Are you, he started. I'm here, she said, I'm me. He believed her. He examined that belief, prodded it, checked its foundations. He believed her. She sat up. She looked at her hands. They were warm now. He could feel the warmth from across the bed. She flexed her fingers as if checking their responses, as if reacquainting herself with the controls. Tell me, he said. She told him. The nave that went on without an end, the ceiling that breathed, the thing at the far end that was not in any specific direction but was entirely present, the feeling of the door in her sternum opening, the cold. And then she hesitated here. She spoke slowly. Then it spoke, inside me, not like a voice, like a realization, like the moment you understand something you've been trying to understand and you can't remember what not understanding felt like. And what it said, what it showed me was. She stopped, tried again. You know how you can describe a room? Any room, you say the dimensions, the contents, the light. And the description is accurate, but it's not the room. You've never actually made the room present in the other person. You've made an approximation. She looked at him. It didn't describe. It didn't make an approximation. It made me present in itself. For a fraction of a second, half a second maybe, I was present in something the size of, she shook her head, the size of the reason things exist, the size of the question that things are the answer to. I was in it, and it was. The word she used surprised him. He had expected terrifying. He had expected incomprehensible. He had expected the vocabulary of horror that they had both been living in for weeks. She said, "Gorgeous." And then she said, "And it's in me now, not controlling me, not replacing me, like a word in a sentence. I'm still the sentence. But there's a word in me now that wasn't there before. And the word is," she looked at her hands again. "The word is very old and very sad and has been waiting for a very long time to be heard by something that could understand it." He looked at her for a long time. "What do we do?" he said. She thought about it. "We tell people," she said quietly. "We tell them what it is, what it actually is, not the horror of it, the truth of it, because it's not," she stopped. "It's not what we thought." Outside, the November morning was arriving with its gray patience. Inside, in the blood and tissue of a 34-year-old woman who had gone to sleep in her apartment and walked through a door in a town that does not exist, something breathed, slowly, enormously, with the patience of something that has been waiting since before the concept of waiting had anything to wait for. It breathed, and she breathed with it. But here is what she did not say. Here is what the composition book contains. In the entry she made 4 nights later, when Daniel was asleep, and she was awake with the new quality of wakeful that she now lived inside. Not the anxious not sleeping of the weeks before, but something different. A watchfulness. A listening that wasn't for the water anymore because the water was inside her now. There was something else in the nave. I didn't see it. Seeing isn't the right concept. The nave doesn't operate by the physics of seeing. But I was aware of it the way you are aware of someone standing in a doorway at the edge of your vision when you're trying not to look. Something that was not the thing I've been calling Vethara. Something separate. Smaller God. Even that word is wrong. Nothing in there was small, but relatively speaking, something less vast. It was watching us, watching me and the entity, from the part of the nave that extends beyond where I could follow. And it was not benign, the way the entity is benign in its enormous, indifferent, too big for moral categories way. This thing had a position. It had an interest. It knew what it wanted. And when the entity drew me in, when I felt the door in my sternum open, this other thing was there, at the edge, and it put something in me too. I don't know what. I've been trying to find it. Looking at myself from the inside, the way you run your tongue over your teeth in the dark to check that everything is where it should be. And everything seems to be where it should be. The word the entity placed in me, I can feel that. Warm, old, sad, enormous and sad. But the other thing, I can't find what the other thing left. That's how I know it's something I need to be afraid of. If I could find it, it wouldn't be what it is. She closed the composition book. The November night pressed against the window. The city was quiet and the apartment was quiet, and Daniel was breathing with the slow evenness of someone who is not dreaming tonight, who has had his one night of the other thing looking out through his wife's eyes, and has decided, bravely, stubbornly, in the particular way he has always had of deciding things, to put it in a box and keep it there. She looked at the window for a long time. Then she looked at her hands. Then she went asleep, and did not dream of Vethara. For the first time since it began, she did not dream of Vethara. She was not reassured. December 4th, 2022, 19 days after Maya Okonkwo's account ends. The forum goes dark. Not individual users leaving, not the ordinary attrition of an online community. The entire forum, the archive, the threads, the 7 years of documented testimony gone. Not cached, not available through any archival service. Gone. The domain registration was allowed to lapse 12 hours before the forum went offline. Registered to an entity called Hesper Solutions LLC. Hesper Solutions LLC was incorporated in Delaware in 2014 and dissolved in 2022. Its registered agent cannot be contacted. Its registered address is a UPS store in Wilmington. We have partial backups, 12% of the archive, enough to confirm what was lost. December 11th, 2022. Dr. Mbeki's Research Institute in Johannesburg issues a statement announcing the cancellation of her research program due to funding reallocation. Dr. Mbeki has not responded to media requests. Her departmental page has been removed from the university website. December 19, 2022. A peer-reviewed letter in the journal Consciousness and Cognition argues that the phenomenon of convergent dream architecture, the journal's term deliberately clinical, represents a form of mass pareidolia, the human tendency to find patterns in noise. The letter is signed by 11 researchers from 7 institutions. We contacted all 11. 3 did not respond. 4 declined to comment. 3 confirmed they had signed but said the letter did not accurately represent their views. 1 said, and we are quoting directly, "I signed it because I was asked to. I'm not going to tell you who asked." January 3, 2023. 6 months after the Amsterdam clinic discharged its 12 patients, the clinic's records department receives a request from a government-affiliated research body for all intake documentation related to those cases. The request is granted. The documentation is transferred. The records department retains no copy. February 14, 2023. Valentine's Day. A woman named Sarah Chu, 28, graduate student in computational neuroscience at MIT, posts a 40-minute video to a platform whose name we are withholding. The video is her describing, in technical detail, an algorithm she has written that identifies the specific theta wave pattern documented by Dr. Harada, the transmitted pattern, the received signal, in publicly available EEG research data. The algorithm, she says, finds the pattern in 23% of all REM sleep EEG recordings in the largest public database of sleep research, representing studies conducted across 16 countries between 2010 and 2022. 23%. She is describing a signal present in nearly a quarter of all recorded REM sleep. The video received 400 views before it was removed. Sarah Chu's academic email now bounces. Her research advisor at MIT, when contacted, says she is on personal leave. We found her, she is in Boston, she is fine. She declined to speak to us. She said, "I still have the algorithm, I just don't know what to do with it anymore." She said, "Have you heard it? In your own sleep, you'd know if you had." We did not answer. We have not been sleeping well. March 2023, 6 locations, 6 weeks. Toronto, Canada. A school elementary, 340 students, reports to the district board that 17 children in the same class have described identical dreams. The class is 4th grade. The children are 9 and 10 years old. The school board refers the matter to a child psychologist. The psychologist files a report. The report recommends no further action. We obtain the report. Nowhere in it does the psychologist document what the children describe. Nowhere in it does the word church appear. Kyoto, Japan. A Buddhist temple reports to its affiliated community that 3 monks in residence have begun waking at the same time, 3:40 a.m., every night, turning to face east and remaining in that position until dawn. The temple's head monk describes this to a local newspaper as unusual meditative behavior requiring further guidance. The newspaper publishes a 2-paragraph story. No follow-up is published. Lagos, Nigeria. A hospital emergency department treats 11 patients over 2 weeks, all presenting with the same complaint. They cannot identify where they are. Not geographically, they know their city, their neighborhood. They cannot identify where they are in relation to a place they describe uniformly as more real than the street they are standing on. 11 patients, 2 weeks, same hospital. The attending physicians have no diagnostic category for this. The discharge notes say, in 10 of 11 cases, patient discharged improved. The 11th patient's notes say, patient remains disoriented. Continues to describe secondary location with unusual specificity, declined to provide further detail when asked. Reykjavik, Iceland. A geologist from the University of Iceland submits, to the Geological Survey of Iceland, a report describing anomalous subsurface readings from a monitoring station in the west of the country. The readings show, and we are paraphrasing his technical language here, a regular, rhythmic pattern of extremely low frequency vibration, originating from a depth that his instruments cannot accurately measure. He describes the pattern as consistent over the 6 weeks of monitoring. He describes it as non-geological in character. He says it resembles in its rhythmic structure respiration. The Geological Survey files the report, requests a follow-up study, allocates no funding for it. Melbourne, Australia. A radio astronomer at a private research facility reports receiving, on a frequency typically used for satellite communication, a signal of unknown origin. The signal contains structured information that does not match any known encoding. She attempts to decode it for 3 weeks. At the end of 3 weeks, she submits her analysis to her facility director. The facility director, she says, goes very quiet, and then says, "I think you should take some time off." She has not returned to the facility. She keeps a recording of the signal on her phone. She says she listens to it sometimes at night when she can't sleep. She says it sounds like something very large, very slow, and very far away. She says, "It sounds like someone breathing in the dark." March 23, 2023, Christchurch, New Zealand. A man, 41, former high school teacher, name withheld, is found by his neighbor standing in his backyard at 4 a.m., facing east, speaking. The neighbor, who provides us with a recorded statement, says the language was not English, was not any language she recognized. Sounded, she says, like something regular, rhythmic, formulaic, like a prayer in a tongue predating recorded prayer, like something being recited from memory that had never been written down. The man, when woken, had no recollection of leaving his bed. He had dreamed, he said, of a church. We have to tell you about the recordings. There are, as of the date of this documentation, 4 audio and 2 video recordings that should not exist, by which we mean the phenomena they capture are, by the current scientific consensus on the nature of dreaming and the laws governing the behavior of matter and consciousness, impossible. And yet the recordings have been verified by 3 independent audio forensic analysts and 2 video authentication specialists, all of whom have confirmed, in writing, that the recordings show no signs of digital manipulation, no inserted audio, no spliced footage, no artifacts consistent with any known method of fabrication. They exist. What they show cannot exist. Both of these things are true simultaneously, which is itself a kind of description of Vethara. The first audio recording was made by a woman in Helsinki, not Maya, not anyone previously mentioned, who set up a recording device in her bedroom on the advice of a sleep researcher who was tracking her somnambulism. The device recorded 22 minutes of silence, followed by the sound of the woman getting out of bed and standing, followed by 11 minutes of the woman facing east and speaking. And then, at the 17-minute mark of the speaking, under the woman's voice, in a frequency range below the threshold of normal audibility that the recording device captured because it was a laboratory-grade device, not a commercial one, a second sound. Not the woman's voice, not anything in the room, coming from below the floor. Not pipes, the analysts confirmed, not pipes, not mechanical resonance, not any acoustic artifact of building infrastructure. A sound that the primary analyst described in his report as structured, and then under that word in parentheses apparently added after reflection, intentional. The second audio recording is shorter. It is 14 seconds long. It was made by a sleep research team in Edinburgh who had attached contact microphones to the skull of a volunteer dreamer during REM sleep to capture bone conduction. What the microphones captured from inside the dreamer's skull transmitted through the bones of the skull, which should not transmit external sounds in any structured way, was the sound of water over stone. Old stone, moving water, purposeful. The 2 video recordings. We will describe only one. It was captured by a camera in the Edinburgh Sleep Lab. The volunteer is in the bed, wired to monitoring equipment in full REM sleep. At 3:41 a.m., the monitoring equipment records a spike, a sudden massive spike in theta wave activity, far outside any normal range. At this same moment, the camera shows the volunteer's body going rigid, arms at sides, face turned upward, eyes open. And then, and this is the thing the authentication specialists could not explain, the thing they each described separately and identically without consulting each other. The shadow on the wall behind the volunteer's bed changes. Shadows do not change unless light sources change or objects move. No light source changed. The volunteer did not move, but the shadow on the wall behind the bed, the volunteer's shadow, cast by the overhead fluorescent lighting that was the room's only illumination, shifted, changed shape. Briefly, for approximately 4 seconds, the shadow on the wall was not the shadow of a sleeping person. It was the shadow of something larger, something whose outline no one in our documentation team has been able to describe in terms that match any biological form. After 4 seconds, the shadow returned to normal. The volunteer woke up, said they had dreamed of a church, reported feeling upon waking that something was looking at them from the east corner of the room. There was nothing in the east corner of the room. Nothing visible. The final entry, July 17, 2023. A report filed with no receiving institution filed, in fact, to a dead email address, returned as undeliverable, forwarded automatically to a backup address that forwarded automatically to ours. We do not know if this was intentional. We have reason to believe it was. The report is unsigned. The language is clinical, precise, bureaucratic. The subject line is phase assessment, Vethara transmission event, Q2 2023. The relevant sections. Dreamer population has exceeded projected threshold. Current estimate, 4.2 million active dreamers worldwide. Monthly growth rate has accelerated beyond predictive model parameters. Manual tracking is no longer operationally feasible. Stage distribution, approximately 71% in approach phase, 23% in familiarity phase, 5.8% in invitation phase, 0.2%, approximately 8,400 individuals in church entry phase or post-entry status. Behavioral transmission has been confirmed in 11 documented cases. Individuals who have not dreamed of Vethara, but who live with or have regular close contact with individuals in invitation or post-entry phase, are showing measurable theta pattern anomalies consistent with early approach phase exposure. Proximity transmission, first confirmed evidence thereof. Directional behavior, somnambulistic east-facing, has been documented in 23 countries. Average duration of east-facing episodes has increased from 40 minutes, 2021 baseline, to 3 hours 17 minutes, Q2 2023 average. Vocalization is present in approximately 30% of cases. Language analysis ongoing. Patterns consistent across vocalizing subjects in 94% of phonemic structure. This is not coincidence. Assessment of entity behavior. All indicators suggest transition from passive contact to active recruitment phase. The passive contact period, which we now assess as having begun approximately in 2007, though earlier indicators may exist, appears to have been a calibration period. Entity was, in effect, learning the frequency, optimizing the signal. The current phase represents optimized transmission. Recommendation. Disclosure is not viable at current stage. Panic response would not serve any operational objective. Final observation. We have lost 3 field analysts this quarter, not to death, to Vethara. All 3 are physically present and biologically functional. All 3 report uniformly that they do not wish to return. All 3 say they are more present in Vethara than they have ever been anywhere. We do not have a protocol for this. We did not build a protocol for this because we did not believe this was possible. We are building one now. End report. We have verified the metadata on this document to the extent possible. The creation timestamp is July 17th, 2023. The IP address from which it was sent traces to a federal government network. We are not nomming the agency. We are not nomming the agency because the names of the people who wrote this report are in the metadata, and we do not want them to lose what they have left. Maya and Daniel moved in December. Not far, a different neighborhood, different building, the same city. Wherever they were going, it would not be changed by geography. And they both knew this, but Daniel had looked at the kitchen chair one too many times. The new apartment was on the second floor, east-facing bedroom. They didn't realize until they'd signed the lease. They unpacked on a Sunday. They made soup for dinner. They watched television, the kind that requires nothing, that delivers distraction without engagement. They went to bed at a reasonable hour. Daniel fell asleep. Maya lay with her eyes open in the east-facing bedroom of the new apartment and listened. No water, not tonight. She thought about the thing she hadn't told Daniel, the second presence in the name, the thing that had put something in her before she could feel it coming. She thought about it the way you think about a splinter you can feel but cannot locate, the knowledge of it more than the thing itself, the irritation of its presence, the persistent, unreasonable sense that it was working its way deeper. She thought about the 8,400 in the post-entry phase, who they were, what they were doing right now, whether they were sleeping or not sleeping, whether they had told anyone, whether they were still themselves. She thought about the field analysts who didn't want to come back. She thought about the woman in the Portuguese print looking slightly away from the viewer. She'd moved it. It was in a box in the storage unit. She'd replaced it with nothing, just a blank wall above the dresser in the new bedroom. She preferred the blank wall. At least blank was honest. At some point, she didn't notice the boundary, which was its own kind of information. She slept. She did not dream of Vethara. She dreamed of the apartment she'd grown up in as a child. The kitchen, her mother at the stove, everything where it should have been, everyone as they should have been, the particular warmth of a kitchen in winter, the smell of something cooking. She stood in the doorway and watched. Her mother didn't turn around. When she woke up, it was morning. The east-facing bedroom was full of December light, pale and thin and honest. Daniel was breathing beside her. Everything in the room was where it should be. She lay there for a while, just lay there, not listening, not thinking about the composition book in the nightstand drawer, not thinking about signals and thresholds and 4.2 million dreamers and a shadow that was the wrong shape. Just breathing, just the December light, just Daniel beside her. Just for now this. It was quiet. The terrible thing was how much she had learned to distrust quiet. There are no conclusions to offer you. This is not, as it might seem, an evasion, the careful hedge of documentation that cannot support its own weight. It is, rather, an accurate reflection of the nature of what has been assembled here. Conclusions are the product of completed events. They require an ending. And what has been documented, what has been, across 7 years and 3 continents and 4.2 million sleeping minds, steadily accumulating, has not ended. It is, if anything, beginning. The entity that the dreamers call Vethara, that thing of vast, inhuman age and scale that has been reaching, in the way that light reaches, in the way that gravity reaches, without agency in any sense we are equipped to recognize, but with an effect as concrete as any physical force, is not malevolent. Of this, we are as certain as we can be of anything in this account. It does not want to destroy. It does not want to consume. It wants, and here we use the word with full awareness of its inadequacy, its profound conceptual insufficiency, to be known. It is, in the words of a woman who went through a door in a dream and came back with something inside her that was not there before, very old and very sad, and has been waiting a very long time. But this is only half of what we know, and it is the comfortable half. The other half lives in a nave that extends beyond measurement, in the shadow behind the vast and lonely attention of something older than the universe's first moments. Something that was there in the nave, watching. Something smaller, which is to say, something that still fits inside the category of wanting, of intention, of will directed toward a specific and knowable end. Something that put something inside Maya Okonkwo in the half-second when her defenses were open. Something that has been doing this, in all likelihood, to the 8,400 who have crossed the threshold. Something that knows that once you have been inside the entity's attention, once the door in your sternum has opened, you are never entirely closed again. Something that has been waiting, not with the cosmic patience of an entity that transcends time, but with the deliberate, predatory patience of something that knows what it wants and knows how to get there, and has been using the enormous blind sadness of its host to reach us. There is a word, as we have said, that we will not reproduce, but we will tell you that it exists, that it was found in the final line of the final notes of a researcher who stopped mid-sentence and never finished, that it opens something, that the opening is one way. Every night, 4.2 million people go to sleep, and some of them, the number is growing, walk down a street made of dark stone toward a church with a spire that bends east, and the church door is open now, and whatever is inside is waiting, and whatever is inside is not alone. And somewhere in a second-floor bedroom in November or December, facing east, in the body of a woman who went willingly through a door and found something gorgeous and something else she couldn't find, something breathes. Slowly, with enormous patience, and with something that is not patience at all, that is its neighbor that lives in the same dark, in the shadow behind the eye. Maya is awake. Daniel sleeps. The city is quiet. There is no sound of water, not tonight, not here. But somewhere below the floor of things, below the stone that underlies the stone that underlies what we have agreed to call the ground, it runs. It has always run. It is going somewhere. It has always been going. We do not know where. We know only that the distance is shorter than it was. Some things are not given to us to understand, only to encounter, only to survive, only to carry afterward in the body, in the dark tissue of the sleeping mind, in the specific and unshakable knowledge that you have been in the presence of something beyond the scale of human terror and human comfort alike, something that dwarfs the categories. What do you do with that? You do what Maya does. You breathe. You face the morning. You notice, in the brief, uncomplicated window between waking and remembering, that the light is still there, that Daniel is still beside you, that the ordinary machinery of the world is still, for now, in motion. You notice these things, and you do not look east, and you try very hard, with everything you have, not to hear the water. Some things are not given to us to understand, only to survive.